Everyone loves a snack. It's in our nature, but do it in a healthy way and get all-natural healthy snacks from Naturebox. With snacks like blueberry nom-noms, strawberry Greek yogurt pretzels, and country ranch sunflower kernels for those sunflower seed addicts, FBIA podcast listeners will get a free month and snack when they go to FBIApodcast.com website and click the Naturebox banner at the bottom of the page.
Shut up and sit down.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Football is America with Ron and Keil. I'm Ron.
I am Kyle. Hello.
And today we are joined by Lester Wiltfong, the assistant editor from WindyCityGridiron.com, which is a Bears news and blog page and is part of the fantastic SB Nation community. We have Lester here to discuss the Bears. Thank you, Lester, for joining us today so Kyle can listen to someone else talk about the Bears rather than me.
That's fine. No problem, guys. I appreciate having me on.
It's going to be wonderful for me to have the perspective of another Bears fan other than Ron. So I know I'm very excited. Let me just ask you a couple questions about yourself before we get into the meat, the sweet, gooey juiciness that is the Chicago Bears season. Every Chicago Bears fan I've ever met has been a fan for like 80 years, even if they're 20. How long have you been a fan?
Most of my life, when I was a real little guy, I was a Dallas Cowboy fan, Pittsburgh Steelers fan, obviously, because at that point you don't know what's going on with football. Then I realized I live in Illinois. The Bears are on TV every week, and it became my team right around 1980-ish, I'd imagine. So it's been a real long time.
1980s. That was a very, very good time to come to the home team.
Yes.
Very nice. And what has kind of motivated you to become a professional writer for this team? Is it just being such a big fan, or was there any other motivation? I've
always enjoyed writing. I've always enjoyed being creative, and then I just kind of I had other things going on when I was younger, and then as I got older, it just kind of steered myself towards sports. I started doing some stuff for the Sporting News. They had a website back in the day. It was a little more social orientated than it is now. The social aspect of it was kind of unique, the way they had things with the fantasy games and the blogging and stuff on there. So I stumbled on that, started writing about the Bears for fun. Then the person in charge of the website asked me if I would come on board and be their official, official Bears guy. So I'm like, yeah, that sounds like fun. And then, that kind of led into the stuff I'm doing now at WindyCityGridiron.com. So I've been with them since 2009.
I'm guessing since you said you became a Bears fan right around the 80s, we always want to know from the people we're interviewing what your strongest memory is. I've got a couple guesses, but I want to hear it from you. What is your strongest memory, good or bad, about this team? It's
got to be 85. I mean, that was just a great season, a fantastic team. It was like a bunch of rock stars on the field, and way back in that day, that was like the ultimate team, and I think they pretty much held up throughout history as one of the greatest teams of all time.
I'm going to actually go a little further. Everybody can say, all right, that's the only correct answer. I'm assuming, like you said, you were younger, so I'm guessing you were still in school during that 85 season. Can you maybe tell us what grade you were in, and just like how nuts was it to be a kid in Illinois when the Bears were not just the best team in football, but the best team in football by miles? I mean, I got to imagine that every Monday it's just, did you guys see that? Oh my God.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, there were parties every Sunday. It was just a great time. I think I was a freshman in high school in 85. So it was, I was still younger, but it was still just a crazy thing. Everyone had their jerseys on. Everyone had their Bears hats, Bears coats. It was just a Bears saturated school, and that's pretty much how it was everywhere.
I am glad to hear it. That's not entirely surprising. That Bears 85 team, that's one of the all-time great teams, definitely. Not at all surprising to see that would kind of get everybody in the whole state together as a rallying point.
Yeah, it was a fun time. It was kind of sad that it was just one title there, but it happens in football. And Bears have been trying to get a second title ever since.
Yeah, I've been a Bears fan from pretty much day one as a kid. I had a grandfather that took me to the games tons and tons of games. He was a season ticket holder. I actually inherited his season ticket holder status. And since then, we've struggled, and what's led up to now. And I sat through the 90s and watched some really bad Bears teams.
Really bad.
And watched Brett Favre destroy us, and then the Packers get to move right on to Aaron Rodgers, which almost seems like cheating. And the most disappointing season I can even imagine or I can remember has got to be this last season. I have never been so pumped for a season and been let down as hard as I did this last year. And we all saw the Jenga tower kind of come down last year. How did you feel about the season as it closed? Was there anything that we could kind of take away as a positive at all?
No, I don't think there is. I mean, it was after his Trestman's first season, there was some optimism around Chicago. Obviously, the Bears seemed to be pointing the right direction. The defense seemed to have some guys coming in that was going to help what's going on there. The offense seemed like it was in place, primed to be one of the best offenses in the NFL. And like you said, it was the most disappointing season that the Bears have ever had that I can recall it too. So. It was just so much bad, and it was just from the start. It was just a couple good things early, but it went downhill really fast.
Well, and it's not just that it was a bad season, but as you said, walking into the year with expectations that this offense cannot be, not just good, but great even.
Yeah.
And we're going to see the maturation of Jay Cutler, and he's got these two big wide receivers. Then it's just watching the fire engine on its way to put out the fire that is your house crash through your living room. Just like, hope, oh no, terrible disappointment.
Yeah, it was definitely the worst.
So there's definitely some turnaround leading to slightly more optimism for next year in the form of staff changes. And with this brand new staff, it's very unprecedented hiring as per the Bears' normal way of operating. So what made the owners kind of go out and do it right this time, or did they do it right this time? Are the fans in for more suffering, or is this new regime change the way to be?
I think the ship is on the right path right now. They've had some problems through the years hiring guys that have no experience. It worked a few times, it didn't work a few times, and I think with John Fox, the guy that he's if anything, he's a professional football coach, and at this time. That's what the Bears needed with the mess that was last year with Trestman. They needed a guy that came in that he understood how to run a locker room. He understands how to get a staff together of a bunch of other professional coaches. So I think it was just the right time for everything to happen the way it did. And I have no complaints with what's going on with the coaching staff this year.
Right, and this was the first time that the Bears had actually hired a coach with head coaching experience. I think it was supposed to be like 40 or 50 years. I think they said George Halas was the last time that the Bears had hired a head coach with any form of head coaching experience. And I actually had never even noticed that stat because everybody thinks about the Mike Ditka days and he was such a great coach, but most people forget that he was actually an assistant coach before he was the head coach of the Bears.
Yeah, he was assistant in Dallas, and he was in charge of their special teams. He had something to do with the tight ends. So for him going from that to the Bears was a real big jump for him, but it worked out.
And there's also the new GM in there. There's a lot to be learned only through watching him work. You can only gauge a GM after the fact. There's no going, oh, well, he was clearly really good as, executive personnel director. No, you can't do that. So we know that every team wanted to interview him and that he's super duper dreamy. That's about it.
But
you got to be excited about that.
Yeah. The thing with Ryan Pace is, he came from the Saints. Yeah. He's never really done the job per se, but he was the intern GM when the Saints had their problem with the scandal over there a couple of years ago. So he actually ran the team as the GM for, I think it was about 6 months. Plus he was also one of I think the only guy in the NFL, in his position that was in charge of both the college scouting and the pro scouting. Usually you have a guy that's either college or pro. He was one of the unique guys that actually was over both the pro and college. So, he has a little more experience coming in than most GMs. So, again, so far so good. It looks good, but we'll have to wait and see what happens in free agency and the draft.
And shifting kind of into next year, what are the biggest concerns going into the year then? Is it the cap? Is it the personnel, the scheme? Or is it just really everybody's worry? Everybody's biggest worry is the perceived fragile cognitive ability of Jay Cutler?
Yeah, that's the thing with Cutler's a big thing. Obviously, what are they going to trade him? I think they're either going to trade him or he's going to stick around. If they're going to cut him, doesn't make a lot of sense from a cap standpoint. So I think you're going to have, his team is just the same quarterback in town again, which is fine. He's fine if the team around him's pretty good. I mean, he's never going to be Tom Brady, but he's an okay quarterback. The expectations of some fans they're waiting for him to make this big jump and play. It's just not going to happen. He is who he is. He's going to make some mistakes. He's really capable of being an elite guy for stretches. But like I said, he's going to make some mistakes here and there. So don't expect him to be Aaron Rodgers. Expect him to be Jay Cutler. And if the run game is clicking, the defense is a little better, I think that's all you need.
Yeah, I have quite a few friends that are obviously Packers fans because of the area I'm from. I'm from Iowa, so there's a lot of separation, and everybody kind of outsources their fandom. So one thing he said to me was Jay Cutler reminds him a ton of Brett Favre, and that he's going to win you games or he's going to lose you games. It's almost a 50-50 split every single time. And more often than not, last year he lost them, but there had been years before where he had won them, making the same kind of decisions that he made last year. And he said that Brett Favre is a good comparison because through the years that he was with the Packers, it just seemed like it was a 4-pick game or it was a 4-touchdown game. It's just how it always is with him. And I thought that was a very unique comparison. And then he went on to say that if Brett Favre played in the league now as opposed to when he did at his prime, that they would be almost the same guy, possibly mirrors similar. So
yeah, that's a real good comparison there. Obviously, with Favre, you got a little more in the upswing there, but he is what he is. I try and tell fans all the time, don't expect him to be that guy. He's just going to continue being who he is. Yeah, there's places his game can get better, but just as long as the team is better around him, he'll be fine.
Now, a large part of this year for Ron, the disappointment stemmed because he was so excited for Jay Cutler, and then reality happened. And, I'm sitting off to the side. I'm his best friend and not a Bears fan. What can I do but point out every logical fact that happened and make him just very, very depressed? It was a good year for me in that regard.
I'll bet.
But, at a certain point, like, it became like, oh, I'm not even going to recount what factually happened because, he's looking at that bottle of pain pills a little too longingly. I don't want him ending it all. It was a depressing year.
It was a depressing year, and I think a lot of it was obviously Jay Cutler, but I think a lot of it was the coachings too. It just it seemed like at some point in the season, there was no trust in Cutler. The Bears led the league in screen passes. If it was 3rd and 15 and the Bears are throwing a screen, that tells you there's no trust in the head coach and the quarterback. And for whatever reason, you have to let Jay Cutler be Jay Cutler. Yeah, if there's if there's going to be a pick thrown, there's going to be a pick thrown, but you can't take the ball out of his hand and make him do all these little check downs because that just shows no trust in him. And it just escalates from there. And it was just a bad season.
Yeah, you have to live or die by his ability. So staying on that same note, with the constant turmoil that has been going on there over the last year, and how did you feel about the prior coaches and current players slamming Cutler? Is it all a true representation, or does it seem as though it's really strange to you as it does to me?
Well, it's always the guy it's a anonymous source, so you're always wondering who it is. If it was some of the old coaching regime, this is the same coaching regime that recommended to Phil Emery they sign him to a huge contract. So at some point they must have been on board with Cutler. So it seems funny that after the fact they're slamming him. Then as far as some of the players, in every locker room, you're going to have a couple players that just aren't in with a certain guy. And it's really easy for a reporter to find a guy that's going to give you the soundbite you want against the guy that you're trying to make a story about. So it is what it is. It's the nature of the locker room. There's plenty of other guys that have his back. So, but of course, if those guys aren't, it's not really newsworthy to have that out there. It's more newsworthy to talk about the couple guys that are going to bash him. So, he's just he is the kind of player that he is. He's kind of aloof. He's always been that way. The way he is with the media, he's just kind of, he's not Peyton Manning, and that's a lot of people want him to be that. But personally, I like Jay Cutler. I think his attitude is a little refreshing. He doesn't really get too caught up in stuff. He doesn't get really high. So you just got to take him for what he is.
like you said, this is the world we live in. This is kind of how it is now. It's all anonymous source and Twitter acknowledgement. We had a situation just a little earlier, and I realized how sad life is in the NFL when it's like, well, it says the Bears hired John Fox, but I didn't believe it because the Bears Twitter did not announce it. And I'm like, well, until they announce it on Twitter, it's not true. Oh my God.
Exactly.
And it was a very sad moment for me going, wow, I now think of Twitter as a credible news source. Well, all right. That's never getting that back, America.
Yeah. I think the key is to find a couple guys that you trust that are in the media. Then if those guys are going to have it out there, then it's okay to believe. But otherwise, There are so many guys on Twitter. A lot of the bloggers you see, they'll just kind of put something out there, hoping to be right in their guess. And if they're right, they can go back and say, look, I was the first guy to report this. A lot of the times they're just guessing. They're just trying to make themselves look like what they're not. So you got to find a few guys you really trust on Twitter and or Facebook, wherever you're getting your news from, and go from there.
Twitter is that weird thing. When Ron won't let me use our Twitter handle because he knows I just post, anonymous sources tell me that Jay Cutler is training on the moon, and it wouldn't work. But I'm an ass, so
it's a quality control situation when it comes to giving Kyle access to things.
I do not blame Ron even for a minute. Just like when Ron's like, no, you do not get to talk to the NFL when they call and complain about the things that I say. Probably a good idea, because I just pour gasoline on that fire. Shifting gears, shunk, moving along. Let's talk Brandon Marshall trade. That I'll say for me, it surprised me, because from the outside looking in, as not a diehard Bears fan, I was kind of looking at the offense and going, a lot of the heart and soul there has to be Brandon Marshall. He seems the most motivated out of anybody on the offense, and now he's going to be getting passes from Geno Smith. Well, he won't be getting them he'll be getting them thrown into the area around him, but it's Geno Smith.
The general direction, yeah, exactly.
Yes, you get the intent, but it won't get there.
Yeah.
There's so much to go on this, so I'm just going to let you free ramble. Your thoughts on this trade, please.
I was a little surprised. I knew he was the Bears were obviously gonna make some explorations and making a move there. But I thought at the end of the day they would decide with a stronger locker room, with a stronger group of leaders in place, that he'd be okay. The Bears obviously decided just to part ways with him, and I understand that from a business standpoint. When he was traded, obviously Bears fans were really up in arms. But then a lot of the beat writers now have come out, and had the reports out there where there were some stuff behind the scenes. It wasn't just the Twitter fight with the Lions fan. It wasn't just the explosion in the locker room against some of his teammates. It wasn't just the trip to New York on his off day to do the Showtime special. There were other things in the off the field where he was complaining. He was mad about certain things being done in the locker room with the coaching staff, and I think that kind of goes hand in hand with the Bears season being just really bad. It kind of escalates what's going on in his mind. He has the borderline personality disorder. I think when things aren't going at its best structural wise, I think it affects him more than it may affect other people. So I think it may have just been a situation where he just had a hard time handling what was going on with the Bears being so bad. So at the end of the day, him being gone, I think is the right move from a long-term football standpoint. I think he will be a good player in New York if they can figure out the quarterback situation. But it makes sense. And then as far as getting a fifth round back, I'm shocked they got that, because it looked pretty obvious the Bears were going to cut him anyway. So it's a move that had to be made at this point in the season.
And one thing that I expressed to a lot of other friends and fans is that one thing the new coaching scheme, I think, is the new offensive scheme and new coach, I think, are going to try and do is kind of limit Cutler on what he can and can't do on the field. What are his options going to be? What is he going to allow to audible? When isn't he going to be allowed to? Stuff like that. And the biggest improv tool that he has was Brandon Marshall. So if you take away that specific piece, now you are going to force him to play the offense that you want him to play. And if you look back, the year that they had Mike Martz, and I'm not trying to say that he was good by any means, but the year that was one of his best years with the Bears.
Yeah,
was when Mike Martz forced him to play the offense the way that it was designed to be played. And he didn't have Marshall then. He didn't have Martellus Bennett then. I mean, these guys are kind of his way of circumventing the rules, I guess, when it comes from the coach, and taking that big piece, that friendship piece away from that. It's like two little kids sitting next to each other in class. You have to separate them. Now the quality of it will be better.
You mentioned, that you have to have those guys apart. Also, there was some rumors of their relationship being rocky. So, it's with Marshall and with the offense moving forward. I think what you said is correct. You have to have Jay Cutler have a more structured offense. What he had with Tressman, he had a lot of option reads. He had to make it the line, and I don't think that's the best thing for Jay. I think you want to get him in an offense where the team is going to really focus on the run. They're going to do a lot of play action. And I think that's the best thing for him because now he's just out there playing football instead of having to overthink everything that's going on the field.
I will say that I really enjoyed, though, Brandon Marshall's Twitter fight with that guy. If I'm remembering correctly, he ended up starting it out like, I'm going to fight you, and then shifting weirdly into, but I'll donate money to charity.
Yeah.
And some bizarre, are we okay with this?
Yeah.
I think we're okay with this. And then it didn't happen, which was the worst thing. Cause I'm like, I don't know, man. Brandon Marshall's a big dude. He could hurt somebody. And being a jackass myself, I know that every now and then I need a good beating. So, to karmically balance out the world, and it did not happen. And that was slightly sad. Ah, well, such is life.
Yeah.
Now let me ask you, there are more than a couple of things that you would be able to say is a deficiency on this roster. And just in general, I guess, and with all the deficiencies that the Bears have, it is tough to nail down what would be the biggest needs, but putting you on the spot as I am at this moment, what is the biggest need for this team right now?
I'm going to cheat a little and say defense. They have a lot of holes on defense, safety, corner, linebacker, D-line. They're just, especially with the switch from a 4-3 to a 3-4, they have a lot of guys that really don't fit the new scheme, perfectly, but they are going to try and make them work there. They just got a lot of work to do on that side of the ball. So I think they're going to target a safety in free agency. I think that has to be the first thing they do. Then the draft should be interesting, and I think they're going to go with an edge rusher. And at some point, they're going to get a 5-tech or a nose tackle at some point, just because you got to have guys that actually fit the scheme that they want to run.
And you just mentioned that the whole switching from the 4-3 to 3-4, there's been a lot of mixed opinion about that because the Bears have always been, the 8 in the box all the way up, just demolishing defense for so long. You look back at the years with Mike Singletary and Dan Hampton and all of those guys, and then it quickly, changed over to the Lance Briggs and Brian Urlacher and, Adewale and Gunglier, off defense there. And it almost was like a seamless transition for the most part from those guys to there. I mean, we had a few years in between, but the transition to 3-4 seems to have a lot of people up in arms, and I find it interesting. Now, I am all for it. As a Bears fan, I'm completely for it because, as Kyle said earlier this year on one of our shows, it's the defense you play if you want to win. And the 4-3 just isn't viable anymore against the type of offenses that are played.
Well, I think if you're going to play a 4-3, you have to do something like what the Seahawks do. It's more of a hybrid look. It's a 4-3 in base, but one of the defensive ends is playing more of a flexed out look. It's more hybrid. You're giving different looks with your over under looks. It's a little closer in scheme to a 3-4, just because it's giving the offense different looks. With a straight base 4-3, there's only a few things you can do as far as what you're going to show the offense. So I think, like you guys said, in this day and age, you have to be flexible from a defensive standpoint, and nothing gives you that kind of flexibility like a 3-4.
So with saying that, do you think Vince Wilfork is going to be a big target for the Bears?
I would love to see him come in. I think he's just one of those great locker room leaders. Plus, he's still really good on the field. He may not be at a Pro Bowl level still, but I think if you take his snaps back a little bit, I think he played over 700 snaps last year in the regular season. But if you cut his snaps back a little bit, I think he's a player that can really, really thrive still for a couple of years here. Plus, like I said, the big thing is he's such a great guy in the locker room. I mean, if you see some of the stuff that was going on in New England, from some of the younger players over there, he's almost like a father figure to them. He has a presence about him. Obviously, he's a huge man, but when he speaks, the players listen. I think he'd be a great target. But with that being said, he may be a little too old for what the Bears want to do. I think they may want to go a little younger. But personally, I'd love to see him get Vince Wilfork.
And one last question for that specific scenario with the 3-4. Do you think they're going to hang on to Shea McClellan? Because now he's going to be going into a scheme where he would actually fit into, first of all. And secondly, do you think they should be able to give him 1 year in the new scheme just to give it a try and see if he can finally be a productive player?
Well, he's relatively cheap as far as his contract goes. And he is under contract for one more season. So I don't think there's any way he's going to be gone. I thought he played good last year as the year went on. He obviously was really shaky at first. Being in coverage is something that he wasn't used to. But I thought as the year went on, he got a little better. And I've always thought that his best spot is actually as a 4-3 Sam linebacker, just because I didn't really see the variance in pass rush moves from him to be an actual premier edge rusher in a 3-4. But with the new coaching staff, maybe he does fit into that mold a little better. But I think he'll be around. I mean, he fits what they want to do from an athletic standpoint. He's been a few years now. He's been all over the field, defensive end, linebacker. And John Fox said he's not sure if he's going to be an outside guy or an inside linebacker. So we'll have to see how he fits into the new scheme.
And you definitely have concerns. You move from a 4-3 to a 3-4, but a lot of times, as you guys have been saying, with this adjustment, you're going to see a 3-4 that sometimes you got 4 guys and you're running something similar to a 4-3. Sometimes you see 5 guys on the line. It's very flexible, and it definitely means a lot of change. It definitely means a lot of free agents brought in, not necessarily to be the answer, but brought in to be a stopgap until you draft your guy. Yeah. So we know that build through the draft is the key to success. We always hear that. But outside of that, build through the draft strategy, how are the Bears going to be doing in free agency? I mean, for some reason, for all of our other interviews, we had the cap information right in front of us, and now I'm not seeing it. So, like, what can we expect? Is it going to be a big presence? Is it going to be hiring low-cost guys that are better fits for this type of defense, guys just as stopgaps? Do you have an idea as to where the team is going to be going just this Tuesday?
If there's going to be a big-ticket guy, I think it'll be from safety. I think they are going to get one of the top safeties that's available for agency, just because I think that's been such a sore spot for them through the years. So I think they have to get a safety. And as far as everyone else, I think it's going to be, like you said, the guys that cost a little less money, but they may be a perfect fit for their scheme. The thing with Vic Fangio's 3-4, he doesn't really have that giant nose tackle. He has guys that play some 2-gap stuff, but on his defense, he may have one guy playing 2-gap, while his other guys in the line are playing 1-gap. So he kind of, again, he's given more flexibility. So, he could have guys that have experience in a 4-3. They could come in and play in this scheme. Just a matter of what they're looking for at this point. But I don't think they're on the Sue sweepstakes. I think he's way out of the price range. Plus, I think he's all but dead on going to Miami. As far as edge rushers go, again, they're not going to have a big splash there, but there's a couple guys they may want to look into and kind of see how the market dictates. But they got Jared Allen and Willie Young, who they already said are going to have to play outside linebacker for them. So, and both those guys make, pretty good money. So until you get everyone on the field, it's kind of hard to see how they all fit in. It's going to be a weird transition offseason. I mean, I think next year they may be a little more in on free agency as opposed to this year.
Yeah, we watched the Packers switch to this, a few years back, and we saw that it took them, a couple of years to kind of get all of that together and transition from the players that were the 4-3 players to the players that were the 3-4 players. And one thing the Bears kind of have going for them is that Lamar Houston, he can already play that down lineman spot, and Willie Young has played the outside edge rusher before. Now, Jared Allen's going to be an interesting conversion, obviously, in I don't foresee that as being that big of an issue because, believe it or not, he can actually play some coverage. He's a big, tall guy who can jump real high. So I'm not too concerned with that. The big concern I have is with those linebackers back there. And we just don't have, with Lance Briggs now going, we just really don't have anybody back there that's already a 3-4 style linebacker, especially in the middle. And one question I really wanted to get to before we start running over here on time was, you brought up Vic Fangio, and a lot of the fans, a lot of the people I've talked with seem to think that wasn't necessarily the best decision because they believe that the defense wasn't a product of his coaching, but more or less that he can only win when he has great players. Do you foresee that as being an issue?
Nah, he's been good pretty much wherever he's gone. His defense has been pretty solid. He was real good at Stanford before he came to San Fran. So, it's just from a schematic standpoint, he gives different looks. He moves his people around. Yes, he had really good players, but this last season, a lot of his players were gone. His linebacking core was gone. I mean, he lost Alden Smith to suspension. Navarro Bowman, Patrick Willis were hurt, and they still had a top 5 defense. So this is a guy that he will use what he has, and he will give the Bears the best chance to win on defense. But real quick, I want to go back to Jared Allen for a second. You mentioned him going in coverage. I actually did a little research on this, and the Bears rarely dropped him off in his zone type of stuff. But when he was in Minnesota in their 4-3, every season he had about 20, 25 snaps where he was actually in coverage. So like you mentioned, it's something that he can do. He has done it in the past. Obviously, he's not as young as he was, but I think he should be able to transition pretty easily to what they ask him to do. And plus, in a 3-4, that edge rushing guy, that's what he's there for. He's there to rush the passer, and that's what Jared Allen is. That's what he is.
Yeah, I have no problems with him covering Eddie Lacy or Adrian Peterson still there, if not somebody else. When it comes to the running back, I have zero concern about him covering them. I am always a little bit concerned when it comes to tight end, but we don't really have a team in the NFC North, to be honest, that has a tight end worth worrying about. So,
and a lot of it is motivation. I'm a big Colts fan, and obviously a few years ago with the regime change and the total overhaul, going from a 4-3 to a 3-4, there was definite concern. How is this going to work out, especially with 2 known pass rushers in Dwight Freeney and Robert Mathis? And it seemed as though Freeney was kind of unsure, like, I don't know about this 3-4. This isn't so good for me. And Robert Mathis had that, I guess, I don't know, you're signing my paychecks, I do what you want kind of attitude. And as we've seen, Dwight Freeney not doing so great, Robert Mathis with the great attitude, despite being on injured reserve and suspension last year before, he was tearing it up. So you get a guy like Jared Allen, if he's willing to make that change, and as you said, he's already shown that he can drop back if he needs to, he could actually become even more dangerous. It's entirely possible.
You mentioned the Colts, and I actually looked at the Colts too. I looked back at when they made the transition, and excuse me, with Mathis, he kind of he went from the defensive end, and then the next year he was actually in the Pro Bowl as a 3-4 outside linebacker. So, and then with Freeney though, Freeney's another guy. When Freeney made the switch, he ended up signing as a free agent in San Diego, and he stayed as a 3-4 outside linebacker. So this is a guy that he had a chance to go back to a defensive lineman, and he elected to stay at where he was. So, the switch, for as long as you have some athleticism at defensive end, the switch is not as hard as you may think. Plus, you look at all the guys coming from the draft. Most of these guys that are being projected to go high as far as it being a 3-4 outside linebacker, most of them are defensive ends in college. So it's a transition you can make if you're athletic enough and if you're smart enough as a player.
We're kind of getting up against the clock here a little bit, Lester. So I want to just we're going to start wrapping up. I just want to get to one last thing. Is I know after the fire poker we took as Bears fans last year, we are a little wary to kind of throw our hope out there. You have the unique ability to communicate with the fans directly through the webpage, and I'm sure that you do a lot of talking with friends and other fans there. What are the realistic expectations? What is the fan expectation? What are your expectations? What are kind of your fellow writers' expectations for the year next year? What's our top and bottom cap here? I don't think, in my opinion, we're not looking to win the division. We're not even looking to make the playoffs. I'm looking for better play all around, even if it's only with 6 or 7 wins.
Well, if you look at John Fox's history, he's always taken over really bad teams. When he took over in Carolina, they were 2 wins the year before him. And the next year they kind of jumped it up pretty significantly. Then I think in the next year they were in the Super Bowl. So with Denver, I think they had 4 wins the year before him. He came in and they got 8 wins during the playoffs with Tim Tebow at quarterback. So John Fox can make a quick transition, but I think the high water mark for the Bears is 500. I just don't see him competing at this point. Unless the defense really comes around. I think the offense, will be fine. I think with Adam Gase, calling plays, it's going to be a system. I think that, again, this is if Jay Cutler sticks around. If they go with a new quarterback, a young guy, I think that everything's out the window. They're going to just really kind of tank this next year. But if they have an offense that has some veterans back there, if they have a couple pieces on offense, the offense should be fine. But the key is the defense. Get the defense righted. See if they can give some different looks to an offense and be something besides the dumpster fire they were the last 2 years.
All right. And lastly, we're just looking for a quick answer here. Where do you see this team going with their first round draft pick?
A lot of options. If it was me making a pick, I'd go Vic Beasley out of Clemson. I think he's the best edge rusher in the draft, and I think that's something that you need if you're going to have a 3-4. You have to have a premier guy that can rush the passer, and he's the guy right now.
That is actually a very logical and pretty smart answer, actually. Okay,
nice.
I would be pretty pumping. I mean, I don't know. You got a logical answer. He transitioned to a 3-4. He's like, oh, what do we need? Pass rush guy. All right. Check that block. On to the next one. It's the end of that game.
Yep.
All right, Lester, we're up against the clock here. We're gonna have to let you go, but we really appreciate you coming on. If you could, we're gonna kind of turn it over to you for a few minutes. If you want to, plug anything, your Twitter. Also, give us, your Twitter handle if you wish for fans to follow and stuff like that.
My Twitter is Wiltfong Jr. It's Wiltfong Jr. Then the website is windycitygridiron.com. We are part of the SB Nation, group of sites there. So, pretty much anything you need for anything is covered there somewhere.
That is where we go for Bears news. Oh, yeah.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much, Lester, for coming on. We really appreciate it.
No problem, guys.
All right. Take care.
You too. Take it easy.
Once again, everyone, that was Lester Wiltfong joining us. That was definitely good. Ronaldo, you being a Bears fan, a Bears fanatic, a man who loves the Bears more than life itself. How did that go for you? Was it good?
It's always great to talk Bears, and I know that it's always great when I have to force you to listen to the Bears talk.
Well, I could tell you were excited because for our listeners, I mean, Windy City Gridiron people who are just like, why are they still talking? Lester's gone, who have already clicked the end button or going, man, my device is on the other side of the room and I'm not getting up to get it. Recently, Ron had just said, wow, I'm terrible. I'm going to fire myself and only Kyle will do the interviews. And this time Ron wouldn't shut up. I'm like, yeah, this is Bears. He loves it.
Yeah, and we have another interview coming up here in just a few minutes with Larry Dyer from the Chicago Bears Review. And I wasn't trying to overload us with Bears talk today, but I just really wanted to get him on. He has his own podcast, and it's going to be great, and I'm really excited.
It's entirely fair to double down on the Bears. We have a lot of Bears fans, I think. I don't know. They're pretty quiet if they're there.
Everybody's gorged too much on sausage.
Well, you made the joke, and I don't have to. And the joke there is not phallic in nature. It is more a rip on the whole superfan Polish sausage and all that image.
Well, sausage is delicious.
I'm not saying that sausage isn't delicious. I'm just saying that, that's the joke. Like, sausage is now a thing. Like, oh, Chicago, you got sausage. All right. And yes, I know I'm saying sausage and not sausage. I know what I do. This is what I do. Annoy Ron, because I can tell this little corner of his eye. He's thinking of killing me, but then he's like, that's way too much work. Why don't I just go eat some sausage instead?
Well, that'll pull us into this one. We got to get ready for Larry Dyer, Kyle. So
I had a couple of things that I wanted to ask, but then I forgot what they were.
Yeah. If you remember I'm doing the interview, just
no, don't remember. Need more coffee.
All right. Have a good one, everybody.
Thank you. We love you.